Okay, let's
On
start
recording.
that. Okay, we are good to go.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee and a special meeting of the Board of Directors. It's August 17th. And I'm calling this meeting to order. And with that, we'll determine a quorum. So Julie, would you like to administer that, or Margaret?
Julie's going to do the administration of that.
Great.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Chairman Houston. So beginning with Director Williams.
Here.
Director Gray. Director Deere.
Here.
Director Alvarez. And Director Houston.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum of the committee.
Excellent. Okay, do we have any public comment?
At this time, we have no advance indication of a public comment, but I will open it up to those that are on the call to see if there are any public comment to be raised. And if so, if you could do a raised hand and we will call on you. Seeing and hearing nothing, I will turn it back to you, Director Houston.
Okay, great. Thank you, Margaret. Let's see. I see no presentations on this agenda.
Correct.
Right.
There are no
Okay.
presentations.
Okay, so moving into our action calendar, we have 5A.
Yes, thank you, Chair Houston. The item before you today is the approval of minutes. And with that, I have Julie Fraser Matthews, Manager of Administration and Deputy Board Secretary, to handle item 5A for you.
Thank you, Margaret. Good morning, Chairman Houston, members of the committee and board. If you'll turn to page 3 in your agenda packet, you'll see the item for minutes. We have 2 that we've attached for your consideration for approval this month. It would be the July 9th, 2022 special board meeting. That was the workshop that the board conducted, and also the July 25th, 2022 regular board meeting minutes for your consideration. So at this time, the recommendation is that the board would approve the July 9th, 2022 and the July 25th, 2022 special or regular board meeting minutes. That's like a tongue twister for me this morning.
Okay, great. Any questions from our member Williams? Director Williams, any questions?
We lost our visual on him.
Any other director have a question? I don't have any questions.
I don't either.
Okay. Is he still with us?
He is still on the line, yes.
Okay.
He's muted, but he is on the line.
Okay.
Director Williams, if you can hear us, you can unmute on your end.
Well, I'm kind of stuck because my alternate's not here. So what do we do at this moment? So we get him back.
This item
on board.
Correct. She is
Yeah,
not
he may
currently.
have fallen off the line. I can give him a quick call. We can table this item if you'd like. Director Houston, I can take the next item.
What is, I'm sorry, I have to
oh.
step away for a minute.
Oh, there he
Oh,
is.
there he is.
Okay. So Director Williams, did you have any questions on the approval of the minutes?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. And nobody else did. We already asked. So I'm good to move this forward to the board with a recommendation of approval.
I concur.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next. So now, Julie, we'll go to 5B.
Thank
Yes,
you.
And with that, I
sorry.
will also have Julie present this item to you. This is a district sponsorship request for fiscal year 22-23. There are 2 items, and with that, again, Julie Fraser Matthews, Manager of Administration, Deputy Board Secretary, will handle this item.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. If you'll turn to page 18 in your board agenda packet, I'll start by saying at the July 26th regular board meeting, the board approved the district sponsorship budget with the condition that each sponsorship would be brought back to the board for their consideration. Today, we have two items for your consideration. The first is the Friends of Bionah Wetlands Moonlight on the Marsh event. This event would be conducted and held on Saturday, September the 10th. And just so the committee is aware, in 2019, 2020, the board did approve to sponsor this event in the past, and we sponsored it in the amount of $3,000. This year, the event that we're bringing before, we're also recommending that West Basin would sponsor this in the amount of $3,000, and that would include a table of 10 to attend this event, an ad in the digital journal that they have, as well as branding on all of the collateral and on their website. And I don't know if the committee would like to take these separately or together. What is your pleasure?
Why don't we talk about them together since they're here? You can go
Okay.
ahead to the next one, yeah.
All right, so the next one is the 2022 Water Reuse California Annual Conference. The district has received a sponsorship request for this event that will be held on Sunday through Tuesday, which is September 11th through the 13th of 2022. And in the fiscal year of 2019-2020, West Basin did sponsor this event at a gold level of $3,500. If you'll notice, if you'll, I'm sorry?
At a committee meeting.
Oh.
Thank you.
I'll go on and to say that in the past, we've sponsored this at a gold level sponsorship, but they have changed the dollar amount structure. When we sponsored it before, it was for $3,500. If you look at, let me get to the page 26, you'll see the different sponsorship levels. They start out at $750, then they go to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $6,000, and $8,000. Staff is recommending that we sponsor this event at the $3,000 level. It's a little bit less than we did before. It does include one complimentary registration. All of our agency information would be on their program, as well as our logo would be on signage throughout the conference. So with that, we're asking that the board would consider sponsoring the 2022 Water Reuse California Annual Conference to be held Sunday through Tuesday, September 11th through the 13th in the amount of $3,000, as well as sponsoring the Friends of Bionah Wetlands Moonlight on the Marsh event that will be held on Saturday, September the 10th, 2022 in the amount of $3,000. With these two sponsorships, if the board does move forward with a recommendation, it would leave funds in the sponsorship account of $46,000 that would be left in our budget. So at this time, I'll take any questions or answer any of them that you may have at this time.
Okay, great. Any questions, Director Williams?
I have none. I'd like to just go ahead and go forward with this to the board.
Okay, any questions from Director Deere?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I also would concur and thank staff for bringing these both to our attention. So why don't we just move it forward to the board with a recommendation to approve? And we'll go from there. All right. Excellent. So thank you. And thank you, Julie.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so now our information calendar, Margaret, item looks like 6A.
Yes, on 6A, I will begin this item, and I know that our general manager, Greg Reed, is looking to log in just momentarily to also address this item and be also available for us on item 6B. So with that, if you could turn to page 31 of your packet, this again is an update on the DLD building relocation, and I wanted just to share with you, again, we've been sharing updates relating to the DLD relocation, and I see Greg is logging in. So once he gets maybe settled, he can provide you the update. especially regarding the update he provided to the board at the special board meeting on July 9th. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg to share that information.
Good morning, directors, and thank you, Margaret, for leading today's Finance and Administration Committee meeting on my behalf. I am broadcasting live from UC Irvine and the Water Data Summit, and it's a really great series of talks, and it's a really great organization. So with that being said, the topic at hand here is our DLD building relocation. And in our recent board workshop, which was conducted on, I believe it was July 9th, I believe?
July 9th, correct.
July 9th, we talked about the status of the relocation effort, and we talked about the scope of services that the board of directors wanted to kind of hone in on and to make sure that those particular activities were supportive of the board's decision-making process. And in that process, the board had identified some key questions that I was asked to validate and affirm. And so those key questions involved affirming the square footage necessary to situate staff in its new location, in particular using the Edward C. Little facility as the template for determining the square footage necessary for staff, and then also to consider some of the more maybe modern ways of situating staff along in that type of configuration, and then also to validate the estimates that were being utilized to develop the cost comparisons between the various alternatives that were being presented in that particular workshop. And so what we have done at the moment is bring on a small task with IDS, who happened to have conducted the study years ago of rehabilitating the current headquarters building. And so they are looking at these key questions and will providing us an update, I believe tomorrow, which will be the midway point of the task. And they're expected to have their deliverables ready by I believe it's August 26th or somewhere in that time frame. So once we have that information, I will be prepared to share that information with the board, and we can continue the discussions of the relocation effort and to ensure that the scope of services that we're pursuing are in fact supportive of the board's decision-making process. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Greg, and thanks for joining us for a few moments. Director Williams, any questions?
Yes, just said, I'm sorry, I missed when will all of the directors be able to hear this?
We will have the information by month's end. And I think the board directive in the workshop was to come back to the board within 2 months. And so 2 months from July 9th would put us into September 9th. And what I think we can do is work with the board secretary to agendize the item in one of the committee meetings with a special board meeting. Or we can host a separate board meeting, special board meeting just on this topic. And so I'll work with our board secretary to coordinate that follow-up.
Oh yeah, I just think it should be a situation where all of the directors are there to hear this, if possible. I know that calendars are tough from time to time, but I think I know Director Alvarez would be interested, Director Gray would be interested, and of course, the President Deere would be interested. I think we all are.
I think rightfully so. It's a very big decision. It's a critical decision. It's a one that impacts staff. It also impacts our financials. And so this certainly is a very critical decision that requires the input of all 5 of our board members. And so with that, I will be working with Julie to put something on the calendars ASAP so that we can reserve that time now. And once we have the results from the work that's being done, we could bring that forward and continue the discussion as it had begun on July 9th.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, that
Director Williams?
does. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. Any other comments, questions from board members? Director Deere?
Nope.
Okay. I guess tagging on to that, so the time frame, you're gonna have a meeting, excuse me, to complete this assigned work and expected due date of August 25, so that's obviously after our, isn't that after our next board meeting? Because that's the 22nd, right?
Correct.
So obviously, by this committee next month, you'll probably have something for us on the committee to talk about, let alone it would go to the next board meeting, and even the current board meeting, anybody could pull the item if they wanted an update on the fly, correct?
Right. I think what we were doing in the workshop was having a discussion around the scope of the architectural and engineering services and the real estate services because staff had advertised a request for proposals. We've presented a recommendation of award to the board for each of those. And the board of directors, had indicated the desire to discuss these matters in a workshop setting. And so therefore, we had a few questions that came up and now we're trying to answer those questions. And once we have that information back from the consultant, we'll be able to continue with those discussions to shape the scope of the real estate services and also to shape the scope of the architect and engineering services.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so
Yes.
to answer your question, Director Houston, we can either conduct these discussions within one of the committees, but I think it probably would be more appropriate to have a special workshop to continue those discussions.
Sure. Okay. I was just trying to get an idea of time frame because when's the next, I don't have the calendar in front. When's the next meeting of this meeting? In September?
September 21st, as shown on the agenda.
21st, though. Okay, so it's a little ways out. Okay. So
Yeah, but
obviously you all will.
we'll conduct the workshop prior to September 9th was the 2-month due date to have this information back to the board. So my commitment is to bring this information back to the board prior to September 9th.
Okay. Oh, that's gonna be tough. All right, so you guys got to figure out what dates that's gonna work. All right. I don't have any other questions, but that's, you all work with the board to figure out what dates we can meet because it's gonna be really tight between now and September 9th. So
Okay, well, at a minimum, we'll submit a written furnishing the information in writing if we're not able to meet by the 9th, but you will have the information by the 9th.
okay, well, with that, I guess you guys will have to start reaching out to the directors and see if a calendar date's gonna work, as you know, and I think that literally gives us, what, 2.5 weeks, something like that?
Yeah.
To try and put a meeting together. So anyway, I'm not even going to comment. It's just gonna be so crazy. All right. Anybody else have any questions on this? I don't have anything further. Sounds like seeing none. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next item.
Greg, if you like, I'll introduce the item and then I know you have some comments that you'd like to share. But the next item for you is item 6B, our hybrid teleworking policy. We will have a presentation from Michelle Green, our manager of human resources, but with maybe some opening remarks from our general manager, Greg Reed. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Greg.
Thank you again, Margaret, and thank you, Michelle, for providing this report out and presentation. So this is a continuation of the discussions that we've begun a few F&A meetings ago, talking about the status of our response to the COVID pandemic, the status within the district, and the decisions we've made to remove the mask mandate and to bring staff, into person in the board meetings and things of that nature. And so in this particular presentation for today, it's dealing with our teleworking policy, which Michelle will talk about in detail. But I'm happy to say that we're looking forward, moving from the pandemic mode more into a kind of a return to normal mode. And so with that, I would like to hand it off to Michelle to provide the presentation.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning. I think it's still morning, Director, Chair Houston, and Board of Directors. As Greg mentioned, this has been a standing item on our information calendar under Finance Administration on our agenda to provide updates regarding West Basin's protocols that are tied to the pandemic and return to the office activities. So at the May 18th, 2022 Finance and Administration Committee, the board was advised that staff would be evaluating the implementation of a permanent teleworking policy. So this item again is to present the board with specific information regarding a proposal for a hybrid teleworking policy and information that we feel is relevant to formation of the policy, including a survey of peer water districts and public agencies. So, since the pandemic started in March 2020, West Basin staff has been in an emergency teleworking status. And in July of 2021, staff transitioned to a hybrid schedule approach. And so now currently all staff work a minimum of 2 days per week in the office and 3 days from home when they are not observing their regular 980 off Friday. So through the process of assessing the viability of a hybrid teleworking policy, the following factors were considered. And first and foremost, the benefits of a hybrid schedule, management practices as it pertains to formation of this type of schedule, staff recruitment and retention, work-life balance, of course, productivity, district culture and morale, and staff mentoring. So as a part of the research that staff conducted, my staff primarily, we looked at a number of things, and one of the things we found was a study that was done by Stanford professor Nick Bloom, and it's a very recent study as of July 2022, where Professor Bloom notes a number of different benefits for a hybrid work approach, and one of those is improved productivity, employee preference, reduce staff turnover, and it can encourage a more diverse workforce. Professor Bloom's study found that a hybrid work model increases productivity by around 5% compared to traditional fully on-site work. And his study also revealed that getting to work in a quiet space without distractions is also cited as a key benefit, where workers can often concentrate better when they're away from a busy office environment. And then the study also found that giving employees what they want in terms of more flexibility is also potentially good for staff retention, as it perhaps is because employees value hybrid work arrangements as highly as a pay raise, and recognizes that keeping an agency's best talent on board is no longer just about the paycheck. Some additional noteworthy highlights from Professor Bloom's study is that an organization and consistency are essential for hybrid work model success, and structuring the week to ensure that staff are in the office on the same days. It also can address employee concerns about the risk posed by COVID-19 and rethinking the office environment to ensure workplace health and safety. That is still a concern for a number of employees, particularly if they have a health condition themselves or may, have a family member with a health condition. Then lastly, technology tools that are designed to support hybrid work models will continue to evolve and be a key part of hybrid work strategies over the months and the years to come. And we have a very skilled IT team that has kept us up to speed on all the newest technologies to address that issue. And I am going to turn over now just so that you have a real fresh idea and you can see it on your screen as well, to packet page 37, which is a PowerPoint presentation that we put together just to give you more insights and more detail on this proposal. So on package page 38, the current status, as I've already indicated, is that we've been in a emergency teleworking mode, and that, of course, was in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the mandated stay-at-home orders. And as I indicated, staff are currently working already 2 days in the office and 3 days from home. Next, page 39. So the summary of the key proposed policy terms is that one, it's going to be participation is going to be voluntary and subject to various conditions. Employees, and that means primarily that if there are some employees who wish to continue to come into the office 5 days a week, which we already have a few that do that, they are more than welcome to continue doing so. The policy will note that we're going to work 3 days in the office and telework 2 days. And so 1 day of teleworking, of course, would be for on the week where we observe a 980 Friday off. So it would be 1 telework day, but primarily staff will be in the office 3 days a week. Employees, as usual, are always required, and this is also a part of our current emergency teleworking approach, that employees must be available and accessible by telephone and or email to their supervisors, managers, and district employees during teleworking hours. The district will provide and continue and already provides basic office supplies, software, electronic equipment, and other necessary equipment for business purposes. That has always been a part of our emergency teleworking policy. And we do keep track of what employees may take home, or for example, if they need to take their desk home, desk chair, or things of that nature, we have kept track of whatever equipment they've taken home. Employees are to maintain a work environment that is safe and ergonomically appropriate with reliable internet connectivity while working from home or teleworking. And then lastly, there's one thing that we should consider, and that's Labor Code Section 2802, which states that it may require reimbursement costs of internet access for teleworking employees under certain conditions. Now, when this packet was put together, we staff had already started researching through a labor firm, Lieber Cassidy Whitmore, on the viability of that, on whether or not we wanted to confirm if the district would be fiscally responsible for providing a reimbursement under certain conditions. And it was after the packet had already been put out that we finally did get a response just yesterday, actually, from Lieber Cassidy. And as suspected, sometimes with law firms, they said it's unsettled whether or not Labor Code Section 2802 applies. However, based on information that I'm going to provide, and this is not in the packet, so just to let you know, like as I indicated, we received this information just yesterday. But their assessment stated that public agencies, it's unclear whether or not public agencies are required to abide by this labor code. Generally, they said provisions of labor code apply only to employees in the private sector unless they are specifically made applicable to public employees. And so currently there's Section 2802 does not expressly state that it applies to public entities. And there is, at this time, is no appellate court decisions that have specifically addressed whether public agencies are required to reimburse employees for work-related use of the internet. Additionally, Section 2802 requires reimbursement of only necessary expenditures. And on this basis, the California Code found that there was no duty to reimburse where a private company allowed employees to participate in a voluntary remote work program. And as I already stated, one of the key proposed policy terms is that this would be a voluntary program. Lastly, moving forward, the law firm indicated that because it's unclear whether 2802 applies, the district could take the position that it is not required to reimburse employees for internet usage while working remotely. Now, if there is any risk to that, it's very minimal, and due to the lack of express statutory language that applies to public agencies within the labor code itself. So I think that answers the question on whether it is or not applicable in our case. And so I believe we would take the approach in applying this policy that is not applicable to the district. The next page, packet page 40. So, summary of management practices to optimize a teleworking policy. So, first and foremost, one of the things the policy would indicate is that all employees would report in the office 1 day a week, where we would have essentially all hands on deck. And we're looking at Wednesdays to be that day because we do have a number of committee meetings and things of that nature on those days, sometimes general staff meetings or all hands meetings as well. We would maintain office coverage and department availability and responsiveness. Managers would be required to measure productivity and accountability for performance. And so in doing this research, we did talk to all department managers, and each department manager has already and continually assessing their staff's performance and their productivity measures through various measures. And some of those measures are standing weekly department staff meetings, daily communication with their staff via Teams or by telephone. They have a number of departments. Some departments have biweekly task sheets that they utilize. Some use status reports. Some departments use daily use of the Outlook calendar to notate employee tasks. And we're also looking into the system programs or software that could also potentially track productivity. And there's the Microsoft Teams approach. There may be a facet in that software that could also track accountability. There's also another program called JBar and Asana, which are also being explored. And I think one of our departments, the PI department, has already used Asana in the past as well. So next page, 41. Considerations for a hybrid teleworking approach. As I stated earlier, there's a number of things that you have to consider. The benefits, staff recruitment and retention, work-life balance, productivity, district culture and morale, and staff mentoring. Next page. And so when you look at these benefits side by side, there's benefits to the employees and obviously also to West Basin. So the employee benefits are flexibility and personal convenience. It's less stress and fewer distractions for the employee, reduced costs of commuting to and from the office, increased job satisfaction, and it can definitively be seen as a number one perk for job seekers. And I've experienced that myself as the manager of human resources with the district, as we have had at least one or two occasions where a candidate may have turned down the position because they could not be promised a continued hybrid work approach. And then benefits to West Basin. It's a more motivated workforce, increased productivity, as Professor Bloom's study indicated, flexibility in employee responsiveness. It can attract and retain top candidates, retain top employees, and it's green friendly, as there's less commuting back and forth to and from the office. And of course, with any policy like this, there's potential risk. And that could be that some employees may feel isolated while working from home. I haven't received any reports of that. And we've continually, the Human Resources Department has continually, given information to staff on ways to deal with mental health challenges or issues, but that could be a potential risk. Abuse of the policy, that's always the case with any policy. Communication barriers can also be a potential risk. Lack of transparency or diminished interpersonal connectiveness. And the hope is that having days where staff are in the office or are required to be in the office altogether could potentially address that issue. Page 43 of the packet. So considerations, as I indicated earlier, staff recruitment and retention is obviously one of those that I spoke to earlier. And employees here at the district have, of course, indicated a strong preference for continued flexibility of a hybrid work schedule approach. Work-life balance, as I already spoke to, it can reduce stress, which creates a more content workforce and more flexibility. And of course, I've already spoken to productivity measures, including goal setting, open lines of communication, and accountability of staff. Our managers, are required to ensure that they're tracking that productivity. And then district culture and morale, page 44. A return to office reporting fosters interpersonal relationships and employee engagement while maintaining our West Basin culture. So our hope is that it facilitates better collaboration and removes communication barriers and mitigates any adverse effects of remote work isolation. And then lastly, staff mentoring. And this is important whether we work from home or in the office. Staff mentoring is key. Managers should be mentoring their staff and can help employees stay connected, engage, and cope with any challenges that they may have in their daily responsibilities. And mentoring can also help employees maintain awareness of West Basin activities and support for professional growth and development, which we do pay close attention to, again, whether we're in the office or at home. The next slide, page 45. So essentially these charts are actually from Professor Nicholas Bloom's study. And what it shows here, the first chart that you see, what are the top benefits of working from home? And as you can see, the highest percentage is 51, approximately about 51%, is that there's no commute. There's the next one is that there's less time getting ready for work, which is about 44%. 41% feel that it's more time with family and friends potentially because there's that lack of commute to and from. Let's see, 36% because it's a more quiet environment where there's no staff interruptions. And in some cases, fewer meetings, which was at 18.2%. Not always the case. We have a lot of meetings here, which are good. But in his study, he found that 18.2% showed that it was fewer meetings. That was a benefit that was noted. And in the study, individuals were asked what their employers plan to do with regard to a post-pandemic work from home approach. And so there are some agencies clearly that said they will rarely or never allow work from home, which is about 27%. But as you can see, going down this chart, there's about 7% of those agencies or employees that are looking at 1 day from home, 2 days per week at 14%, 3 days at 13.9%, and four days at about roughly 11%, and then 5 days per week at 25%, which is pretty high, I thought. But there are some agencies or employers that are looking at continuing this approach for the future. Packet page 46, please. So we did look and conduct as part of this research, a peer agency review or survey. So we did that in May of this year, and to determine, other comparable agencies, their stance on a permanent hybrid schedule. So out of 18 agencies, there were 5 agencies that have already implemented or are in the process of implementing a permanent hybrid schedule. And there were about 4 agencies that have no plans to promote or to implement a permanent hybrid schedule. There was, of course, with any survey, there's some agencies that did not respond. Now, some of those agencies we wanted to just highlight here that already have a policy in place or in the process of putting one together. Metropolitan Water District is one, and Walnut Valley Water District, they already have a policy in place. Water Replenishment District has a policy in progress. Santa Margarita Water District also has a policy in place, and Western Municipal Water District has a pilot policy already in place. Next page. So the alternatives that we're looking at here and want for our board to consider is to continue either working under the current emergency teleworking policy, or second, require all staff to return to the office full time. And the third consideration is to implement a permanent hybrid teleworking policy, which is our general manager's recommended alternative. For next steps, next page. to present updates to the administrative code for board consideration at the Finance and Administration Committee and adoption at the full board meeting in September of this year. If the board considers the recommended alternative, then develop a hybrid teleworking policy enrollment form that would indicate that, because again, this is voluntary, that form would indicate that these are the individuals who are volunteering to be a part of this program. Train staff, of course, on the administrative code updates, and then implement the policy. And before I conclude, going back to what are some of the benefits to researching and looking at this issue. So, as research has shown, the hybrid work approach can improve employee productivity, meet employee needs for flexibility, reduce staff turnover, and potentially encourage a more diverse workforce. And, we find it very important here at West Basin to review this policy because it demonstrates sound efforts by management to address change in working conditions. Again, we're all working under a different approach these days after the pandemic, or as we're still sifting through it, and particularly in light of, the post-pandemic work environment. So with that, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Sure, thank you, Michelle. And I guess maybe Greg, if you have anything to add on, and then I'll open it up to the directors.
I would just say thank you first, Michelle, for putting this presentation together and doing all the work to help evaluate the merits of the policy proposal here, and the peer agencies and the important study that you presented from Dr. Bloom. I would just clarify that the management practices would not be necessarily within the admin code. But that would be more of just how we work as a management team to make sure that the policy implementation works correctly, and it would be adjusted in the way we approach it should we see any issues that need to be corrected. So that's just a small clarification. But just in general, I think that the recommendation is being presented because it's a good way to maintain the top talent that we have, and to attract top talent that we want to have in the future, and to provide that enduring work-life balance that I think all of us, both staff and management, and perhaps our board, have found to be important going forward after having lived through a virtual environment for the past 2+ years.
Okay, excellent. I see Director Williams is on the phone. So in the meantime, Director Deere, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think it was a very good report.
Excellent. Director Williams.
No, thank you.
Okay, great. And I don't really have, I really have no questions. It's extremely thorough. Thank you for doing that research on the other agencies. It's interesting to see what some of them are doing and where some just are not changing. The only thing I think I'll say is this, to me, seems to be the new normal of the workforce. And obviously, Michelle knows this firsthand, and other agencies know it, and the private sector knows it. I'm extremely supportive of a hybrid schedule, whether the magic number is 2 days a week in the office or 3 days in the office. I really leave that up to the management team and our general manager to determine. But I think you all have put together a very thorough analysis. And so I just want to say I support looking at this. And I see that your time frame is potentially, I think, in September to maybe have this implemented or wrapped up for the board discussion, Greg. But with that, I'm just supportive of where we're at so far, and I just look forward to the final proposal you would bring to the board as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, very good. I appreciate those remarks, Director Houston. And our intention is to bring this forward as a presentation next Monday to the full board. And if there seems to be consensus around the recommended alternative, which is 3 days in the office, 2 days teleworking, then we will proceed with the next steps that Michelle outlined, which is to redline the administrative code and then bring that to this committee next month. And should that get approved for full board consideration, then the intention is that we would present that, to the full board in the September meeting. And if the board adopts the red line changes to the admin code, then we will implement it on the same day while we're implementing the steps of, developing the forms and getting people enrolled and all of that. So in other words, the emergency teleworking policy would be adapted to match the recommendations here.
Okay, very good. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for that report. And I think we are good with all the questions and comments.
Thank you.
So good. Okay. And so if anybody had anything else, I think we're good. So let's move on to the next item. Let's see, what is it? 6C, correct? Fiscal year?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
So yes, we're moving on to 6C, which is our fiscal year 2021-2022 budget to actual results. And with that, we have our Manager of Finance, Marianne Rexroad, to provide you the summary of that report. And that will begin on page 50 of your packet.
Thank you, Margaret. Good afternoon, Chairman Houston, members of the committee and the board. As Margaret indicated, I will handle item 6C, which does begin on page 50 of your packet and does run through page 53. As Margaret indicated, this is for the fiscal year 21-22 budget to actual results. And with that, if I could have you please turn to page 53, and I'd like to run through those results with you this morning or this afternoon. So first, I just want to point out that these are preliminary and unaudited numbers. As we do every year, we close the fiscal year, we present the budget versus actual, and then our auditors will come in over the next few weeks. And then if there are any adjustments, those would be reflected in their report. However, for today, I will be presenting on these preliminary and unbudgeted or unaudited numbers. So I want to start off at the very bottom of the page. You will see that we ended the fiscal year with net revenues of just over $8 million. That was about $6.3 million short of what we had budgeted. And so I want to walk you through those reasons why that we fell short of our budget. So let's begin at the top under our operating revenues. At the very top, we see we have our imported water sales. As you recall, we did have some additional, if you will, imported barrier sales that had to be injected into the West Coast barrier due to the Hyperion spill. And so we did end up the fiscal year with about 7,600 acre feet above our total budgeted acre feet for imported water sales. Of that, almost 7,000 or just over 7,000 was directly related to the barrier. So the majority of that increase was because of, again, the barrier imported sales. Moving down to the next line item, which is your recycled water sales. Unfortunately, we had the opposite effect here, again, as a result of the spill at Hyperion back in July of 2021. So with that, we did have most of the impact had to do with our barrier recycled water. We had anticipated having about 10,600 acre feet for the year. We ended up the year at under 1,700 acre feet. Also affected was our refinery sales, and as we have mentioned through the previous quarters of reviewing our budget versus actual, we did have the necessity of purchasing water in order to supplement the recycled water that was used to blend to meet our customer needs. So with the refineries, we were short about just under 2,000, about 1,800 acre feet. So you can see from our revenues that we did have 8,000 above on our imported and about 8 million above and 13 million below for our recycled water sales. However, one bright spot, if you will, is our other revenues. If you recall, back in January of this year, we were awarded a grant for the coronavirus relief, which came through the California Department of Finance through the County of LA, and that was just under 2.4 million. So that did help us out a bit. But all in all, the operating revenues ended up about 3.2 million short of where we had budgeted. And I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on the revenues. Otherwise, I'll move down to the operating expenditures.
Any questions?
No questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So moving down to the operating revenue or expenditures, again, you'll see in that first line item, the imported water purchases were, if you will, negative. That means we had to buy more water than we anticipated. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, we did have to buy some imported barrier water to make up for those recycled water sales that we could not produce because of the Hyperion spill. So we ended up the year with about was 115,000, as I mentioned, compared to about 108,000 in the budget. So for the recycled water operations.
Excuse me for interrupting. What line are we on? I'm lost here.
Oh, about the middle of the page on page 53, Director Deere, under operating expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so recycled operations, you'll see there we were under budget about 540,000, but I want to highlight this item because, as I mentioned, we did not make our recycled water sales for the year. We had budgeted about 34,200 acre feet, but in reality, we sold 23,000, just under 23,100. So what happened was your per acre foot costs were much higher because of the lower acre feet. So we had budgeted about $1,215 per acre foot, but because of all those additional costs that we incurred because of the spill and some of the other reasons, which we'll go into when we get into our next report, our actual per acre foot cost was closer to $1,800. It was $1,776 for the year. So you could say, oh, we're under budget, but really, if you look at it on a per acre foot cost, we are over budget. I won't mention too much on the desalter operations. As you know, we have reduced or had ceased our operations there. So those are just some minor, if you will, operating costs of that facility. But moving down into the technical plan, I wanted to highlight this item. As you recall, last year when we were budgeting for the agreement with the three-way agreement with LA, we did budget about 3.3 million for that program. In actuality, we have incurred about 2.3 million for that. So there's a savings there as of this date. And all in all, again, in operating revenues, that finishes the year at about 5 million less than what we had budgeted. And then moving down under your non-operating revenues and expenses, one item I want to highlight here is the standby charge. As you recall, when we put together the budget last year, we had not yet received the approval from the judge on the settlement. And so when we provided the rates for the fiscal year for the standby charge, those were at the historical rates. So we did budget a higher amount, or excuse me, we budgeted a lower amount, but we received a higher amount. So all in all, we finished the year with an overall debt coverage of about 1.36 as compared to 1.70. I want to add a couple of other items here before I open up to questions. This year we did put into the board packet, and I thought it's worth mentioning where we landed on our budget versus actual for our capital program. So we had budgeted about 59.7 million that we thought we would spend the year. In actuality, we spent just over 20 million for our capital program. Another item I wanted to point out as well is each year we are required to record, it's called GASB 68. This is an entry that we make that unfortunately we don't have any, if you will, control or foresight of what's it's going to be. And this year it was a, if you will, a positive impact to the district for GASB 68. And what that is, it's a reflection of your pension costs. And as you know, with the financial market over the last, prior to this recent few months, it was in fairly good condition, and we had realized some very well investment gains, some good investment gains. And so that was recorded within this GASB 68. So what it did, it reduced our benefit costs, and those benefit costs are allocated to each of these programs. So that kind of helped us out this year. As I mentioned, we don't have necessarily any control over that. That's something we're required to do. We don't budget for it, but I wanted to point it out that it did have a favorable impact for us this year. And with that, I'll pause to see if there's any questions.
Okay, any questions, board members?
No, thank you.
No, thanks.
Great, Marianne, is this the end of this portion?
It is, yes.
Okay, so I
Thank
just wanted to, on the, if you wrap it all up at the very end of the day, you're looking at, we were budgeting net revenues of 14 something million dollars, but what came in is a little over $8 million, right? That's what it
Correct.
comes down to. Okay.
Correct, yes.
And a significant part of that, of course, was Hyperion and the recycled water sales.
Correct. And that 8 million, just to point out, we did reinvest those in our capital project, as I pointed out earlier.
Okay. Understood. All right. Well, with that, I don't have any other questions, but thank you for this report.
Welcome.
Okay, let's see. Margaret, do you want to go on to the next item, please?
Yes, and get used to Marianne's voice. She'll be covering the next item as well. This one is our annual recycled water operating summary. So this is where she'll go into a little bit more detail on our recycled water operations and more specifically about the costs associated with that. And with that, Marianne, I'll turn it over to you. Again, this item begins on page 54 of your packet.
Thank you, Margaret. Yes. So as Margaret indicated, this is agenda item 6D, begins on page 54, but if I could ask you to move forward to page 56. I'm sure you're familiar with this form. This first page does outline our operating revenues for the recycled water program. I like this page because it does give you a much more detail than I previously shared with you in the budget versus actual. This will break down those revenues by each type of water and by customer as well. So as I had indicated earlier, we finished the year with just over 23,000 acre feet of recycled water sales, again, compared to a budget of about 34.2. So we fell short about 11,000 acre feet for the fiscal year. The you can see from this, again, this page here, one of the heavier hit, if you will, was the barrier. We had projected to have 10,600 acre feet. We ended up the year at just under 1,700. Some bright spots I'd like to point out is on our Chevron boiler feed, low pressure and high pressure. You will see that in both of those categories, we did exceed our budget there, as well as a nitrified. So again, as I said, I like this sheet because it can break down by each product and by customer. And so before I move on to the next page, I'll just pause to see if you have any particular questions on any one of these line items.
Any questions? I'm just looking through it myself, Marianne, I'm sorry, Margaret and Marianne. I don't have any major, well, I see the difference here. Yeah, West Coast barrier. And obviously Chevron seems to have been doing a little more than what we had anticipated. So.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, very good. No other questions. You can go ahead.
So let's move on to the next page, which is page 57 of your packet. And again, this gives you a much more detailed look into those costs, our operating costs that we touched upon earlier for the recycled water program. Again, we finished the year at just under 41 million in costs compared to a budget of 41.5. And as I indicated earlier, it does seem like, hey, we're under budget, but really when you look at the acre feet we sold, it actually was more than we anticipated to spend. So a couple of items I wanted to point out here. You'll see, as I mentioned earlier, about that GASB 68 effect. You'll see under that third line item of numbers under the actual benefit allocation, that negative number. Again, this was the effect of allocating that particular journal entry. It reduced our costs, so a little bonus for us this year. And then moving down to the chemicals, just want to comment on that, even though it is under budget. You recall this is actually higher than what we anticipated to spend by acre foot. We had budget approximately $300 per acre foot. It ended up being at more closer to over $400 per acre foot because of a combination of less sales. And of course, we've had numerous of our vendors come back with rate increases as well. Another item to note is our solids management towards the bottom of the page. Again, even though we had less acre feet, you'll see that number exceeded budget, again, as a reflection of some of the issues that the operations folks had to deal with with the Hyperion spill. And then right below that, under the utilities, wanted to point that out as well. As I've mentioned a number of times, we had to purchase potable water, imported water, to make up for the recycled water to meet our customer needs and to blend that. So those dollars, the expense was reflected here under utilities. It's actually for the purchase of water. So with that, that completes my report, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions?
No, thank you.
I do
Yeah.
just
Nope.
want to one clarification as it relates to the benefit allocation. As Marianne mentioned, we have a positive impact, if you will, because of that GASB 68 entry. Overall, I think it was a $4 million entry that was made, and you're saying, but we had, losses this year. How could that be? I do want to clarify that just to kind of give you a heads up to next year. It is a 1-year lag when we report this number. So it was the $4 million positive impact that we had last year that we reflect into this year's numbers. So knowing very well that that the pension suffered losses this year, preliminary numbers show that the pension system, rather than earning 7%, actually lost 6.1% for the year. So we're going to see a very significant impact on not just our pension system, but the overall pension system. And so that, therefore, you're going to see that now have a negative impact to us in the fiscal year 22-23. So again, while this is sort of a non-cash entry to us, it is one of those items that we unfortunately do record. It does impact our bottom line. And we wanted just to share that with you, because normally this has been in place for a number of years, but it's been more significant both in last year's positive results, this year's negative results, but again, a 1-year lag on both. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of questions just so I understand really quick. One of them is so indirect labor, what exactly does indirect labor entail?
Margie, do you want me to take it, or would you? Okay, so indirect labor is for folks like myself, Margaret, Michelle. We don't work directly on projects. We assist through the things we do. And so our cost is allocated to all operating programs.
And so the difference that you may see here from a budget versus actual perspective is let's say we thought we were going to spend 20% of our time in this particular budget, but we actually spent 23% of our time will follow their time. So if we are spending more in a particular area, then the indirect costs associated with it will follow as well. So you'll see that on the direct labor, you see that we're higher as well on that area. So it just means that there's more level of effort that occurred within the recycle water operations. And maybe it's because we had, more all hands on deck as it relates to maybe the Hyperion issue. Or it could just be that the hours that we thought we would be spending in other areas did not occur because maybe of an opening or something to that effect. And therefore, those hours now, those allocations are shifted based off of actual hours spent, or actual dollars spent. Let me put it that way.
I'm sorry.
That makes sense. And I think I just have like 2 other things. So contract operations, if I'm reading this right, we basically spent, it looks to me like $1 million, give or take, less than what we budgeted, right? So that's our contract operator.
Correct. This is primarily Veolia, but it also includes Inframark.
Oh, Inframark. Okay,
yes.
Gotcha. And let's see, I think the other one I noted here was the secondary effluent. So this is the purchasing of it, correct? Is this the purchasing of secondary?
That's
And so
exactly this. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a function of
Down.
what we purchase through Hyperion, and then it's just a multiplication of acre feet times the rate.
Okay, so obviously we bought a lot less, if you will, due to the spill. But of course we had to buy more Met water. Okay.
Right, and I should just clarify that buying the more wet met water or the potable water is actually reflected in your utilities line. So that includes primarily it includes your utilities, your electricity, if you will, but it does also include a little bit of gas, but also the purchase of water. And in this case, imported water for that need to be able to blend, as Marianne had shared earlier.
Okay, perfect. All right. I don't have any other questions on that item. If you want to go to the next item.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Yes, and
Oh,
let me
Margaret,
just do a quick introduction on this one. So again, this is our quarterly debt and swap report. Per policy, we are required to provide a number of key sort of metrics, if you will, to you. So again, Marianne will share this information, and I'll just tell you that she will want you to go directly to page 61 of your report. So if you want to turn to page 61, she'll be able to start on that page.
We've been working together way too long, Margaret. You know me too well. Yes, thank you. If we would start on page 61, this particular page, you'll see this summarizes our debt obligations. It is as of June 30th, 2022. So just to point out, as we've indicated before with the commercial paper program, we have not pulled any funds from that. So you'll see zero balance, as we've been saying throughout the year. But we did finish the fiscal year with about 195 million of outstanding debt. So that's really the only item that on the debt that I want to highlight. Unless there's any questions, I can move on to the swap report.
You can go ahead and move on. Thanks.
All right, so let's turn to page 64. You may recall we do have one swap outstanding. Our counterparty in this case is Citibank. We have been sharing with you every quarter that this particular swap is scheduled to terminate in 2027. So you will see that number continuing to drop as far as our total notional position, and as well as the total mark-to-market value is dropping as well. So that's the highlight of this particular report. One thing that on the following page, page 65, again, wanted to point out that this particular swap is swap performance is about 3.78 as compared to what it was last quarter, so not much of a change. It does continuing to mature, if you will, so that remaining average life has dropped down to 2.68 years. So everything very positive, on schedule, if you will, with this swap. And Margaret, did you want to add anything about the LIBOR?
Yeah, so two things I wanted just to share with this. One is because of the movement in the market, the LIBOR market is seeing sort of positive returns. And as a result of that, that's why you start to see this drop in this mark to market. And as a result of that, at some point we may see an actual positive number here. That may be a consideration for us to consider. Is there anything we would like to do to terminate it if we wanted to? Today, if we wanted to terminate it, we would have to pay the $369,000 plus probably some transactional costs in order to make that happen. We certainly don't need to, but we continue to monitor it, and we will continue to see if there's an opportunity there to see if that makes sense to us. But the second point is that we also are following another GASB requirement. So our regulators are the Government Accounting Standards Board. They did put a pronouncement in place. They actually deferred that pronouncement, but it is relating to the phasing out of the use of LIBOR, not only in sort of swap arrangements, but any other places where LIBOR is mentioned, and to look to some other index there. For us, it would be most likely the
SOFR, is it?
SOFR, and I'm just blanking on what SOFR stands for, overnight funds rate. Don't remember what the S stands for, but nonetheless, as we will continue to monitor that, certainly before the item is there, we may need to follow certain protocols, and as we learn more about that and the final sort of implementation date of that phase out completely, we will then be providing an update with the board on that. And so those are just a couple additional points we wanted to make with you regarding our swaps. Normally, it's just a number that we share with you as required by policy, but there are a couple of interesting notes here on this particular month or quarter.
Oh, this committee's going on. Yeah, might as well take it except for the coffee and my glasses.
And with that, we're ready to move on to the next item, Director Houston. And with that,
Okay.
I will turn it over to Marianne to cover the balance of the agenda.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Margaret.
Remind us which item are we on now?
We are on item 6F.
6F, okay.
And we'll start off
ahead.
with item A, which is your demand list for the month of July 2022. As you'll see, this does start on page 69, the demand list, and it does run through page 74 of your packet. For the month of July, we did have expenditures of 33.8 million. There are a couple things I wanted to point out about that, why we got to that number, if you will, because it's quite high. During the month, we did make our semi-annual bond payment. This bond payment includes both your principal and your interest for your outstanding bonds, and that amounted to just under 13.9 million. That can be found, if you want to see the specifics, is at the top of page 74. You'll see U.S. Bank, Corporate Trust Services, and each one of our outstanding debt, I should say, is listed there, and the amount for each that we paid. Again, totally just under 13.9 million. The other item to note, which we do pay every month, is the Metropolitan Water bill. That was about 12.2 million for the month. Those two items alone made up the 26 million of our 33.8 million. Otherwise, I have no other items to note unless there's any questions I can answer.
Okay, any questions, board members at all?
No, thank you.
Director
Oh.
Houston, this is Director Gray. I am on the line now. Thank you.
Okay, great. We note your attendance at this time. Thank you, Director Gray.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and move forward, Marianne.
Okay, so let's turn to page 75 of your packet. This is item 6F, which is your cash and investment report. Keep in mind this report is as of July 31st, 2022. I'm happy to announce that if you recall back in June, our general manager had made a comment regarding the California class and our pending involvement in that particular investment pool. During the month of July, we did make an initial deposit of $3 million into the investment pool, which is now reflected in both the numbers on the left and in the pie, the chart you see on the right-hand side. So again, very well diversified. We're happy to be involved in this pool. It does show very promising returns, and it does have the ability to having good liquidity, meaning that if we need money in any particular day, we can make that request, and by 11 o'clock, we can have those funds the same day. So it has a dual purpose, let's say. So for the month of July, you will see our total market value ended at 70.4 million. That is a drop from what you saw in the prior month, and that reason is what we talked about earlier is we made a very substantial bond payments in the month of July and to pay both our principal and interest. So it did bring our values down in our portfolio to that 70.4 million. Moving on to the next page, 76. Again, this particular page just shows the quality of your portfolio. Again, very high quality. Most of the funds that are not in LAIF or in the investment pool I just mentioned or in the bank are all invested in an A or above as far as their credit quality. So again, very strong. The following page, page 77, just shows the maturity distribution of your portfolio. Again, we do have quite a bit in that first column because we do like to have liquid funds to pay for those needs on a day-to-day basis. Again, making up most of it is your LAIF and your investment pool and your cash balances, but you'll see the rest of the portfolio is spread out to give us, again, that diversification also in your duration. And then moving on to page 79, this, excuse me, 70, my apologies, 78. This is also required for us to share with you. This is your transactions for the month. Again, if you look at the middle of the page, here is that California class that I mentioned earlier, where we made an initial investment of $3 million, and you could see at the end of the month it already had earned some interest with that. Otherwise, there were some acquisitions. You'll see also that Malaga Bank, which is the third purchase there. If you recall, this is one of our community or small community banks that we are involved with, and they had made their presentation back in July. We did have the opportunity to reinvest in their bank, and they were able to meet our policy, which was at that time, which was 10 basis points within the overnight Fed rate. So you see that yield went up quite a bit. We're at 1.48 for that particular investment. So I'm happy to report that. And then the other items on the sheet, if you will, are just our normal ins and outs that are maintained by our investment manager, Chandler. One thing mentioned about Chandler Asset Management, they will be here next month for the F&A meeting, and they'll be presenting their annual presentation to the committee. The remainder of this particular item is all of the details of your portfolio. And with that, I'll just pause to see if there's any questions.
Dr. Houston, I just wanted to, and other directors, I would like to just share with you, actually in the disposition, we did have City First return their funds, Broadway Federal. They did not meet the policy requirements. They were quite substantially lower than, if you will, the amounts that were there. But I'm happy to report that we did meet with Malaga Bank and City First, regarding sort of the bank's approach to setting rates and what it is, and to see what feedback we can provide to the board. And so we'll have more information to you as we gather the information to continue to support the small and community bank program. They understand and are working with us to try to give us the best rate that they can. But just to give you a little heads up, we do anticipate that it's still being not able to meet the policy requirements, and we will be seeking the board's approval to waive that requirement to continue our relationship with them. And we'll bring that to you next month as we continue to look at their investments with us. And again, we will be bringing more information about the small and community program, if not in September, into October, with a thoughtful response on how do we continue to support this program and expand the program with other participants within our service area.
Okay, excellent. I'm really looking forward to that, Margaret, because I would love to hear what you all have found out there, as well as what proposals you could provide us on thoughts and ideas to work better with some of the banks in our regional area. So, you know, I don't even want to put the cart before the horse, but I really would love us to look at how could we work with some of the different banks that are now in our area. And it's not always just with the big banks. So anyways, sounds like a good topic for a month or two from now. I don't have any questions on this section. Director Williams or Director Deere, any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. Let's move on to the next section.
All right, so we are on item 6FC, and this is your monthly water sales, and they do begin on page 92 of your packet. So starting from the top of the page, we have your imported retail sales. We just have the month of July to report. As you know, we're just starting the fiscal year, so not a lot of information to share. Unfortunately, the month we ended up with just under or just over 8,900 acre feet in sales. Primarily, the reason for that being lower than we budgeted, you know, there's been a lot of messaging to conserve, and we think that is now taking hold in our service area. And so we do have, if you will, a negative variance from our budget of about 1,200 acre feet. But as always, we will continue to monitor this and bring this back to each month. Moving down to the bottom of the page, you have your imported barrier sales. A little bit of a better picture, I think, than we had last year. This time you could see when the spill happened, we had over 900, almost 1,000 acre feet of imported water we had to inject. That's slowly going down. You can see for the month of July, we had 633. Of that 633, 486 of it was specifically for the West Coast barrier, again, to make up for those sales that were not able to accommodate through the recycled system. But that did if you will, bring us more in line with budget at 558. So we're about 75 acre feet above what we had budgeted for the month of July. And then if I could ask you to move to page 93. And 93, at the top of 93, you'll see these are your recycled water sales. And I will have to point out a typo that I will correct. The budget is actually 32,643. This does reflect 34,000, so we'll make that correction. But anyhow, for the month of July, again, a little bit lower than what we had hoped for compared to budget. We're about 790 acre feet below what we budgeted, but very close to where we were last July. And if you could move towards the bottom of the page, I want to run through with you very quickly what were the reasons for us not making our budget this particular month. Very much like what you heard from fiscal year 21-22, you can see our barrier sales were limited to about 500 acre feet. I did have a discussion with operations, and they did indicate that we are being limited in the amount of injection into the West Coast barrier by the county. So we had budgeted about 12 MGDs for the fiscal year. Unfortunately, we are being limited to about half of that currently. So we're hoping that once that is rectified and we're able to inject more, the county is doing some rehab on some of their wells, and once that completed and we can ramp up our operations, we're hoping to maybe make up a little bit of that ground in the future months. With the refineries, you'll note that we are a little bit under budget as well. One thing we did note that was primarily with regard to our low pressure boiler feed sales. And looking at that a little bit closer, we noticed that Chevron had an unexpected turnaround during the month of July. We weren't aware of that, so that did affect our sales a bit, as well as Marathon was significantly lower than what we had anticipated. And the operations department is looking into that specifically because we think there's a little inconsistency in the reads that are being reported by the customer. So we're going to get back to you on that once we have more information, and we hope that that number will increase in the future. But I just wanted to point out that was lower than what we had anticipated for the month of July. And with that, that concludes my water sales reports, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I do have a question. Can you repeat the number that was inaccurate on here so I can make a note?
Yes, Director. At the top of page 93, we have our fiscal year budget. It should reflect 32,643.
32,643. Okay.
And we'll get that corrected and into the board packet for Monday.
Okay, perfect. And then, so the county right now, and I know they're doing rehab on wells even right here nearby in Manhattan Beach, I see that. So they are at this time limiting what we're injecting, or
That's correct.
Okay.
I was told that we are limited to 6 MGDs per day, so that is much lower than what we had anticipated.
Okay, now are we using recycled water on that at this time, or is that imported?
It's a blend again. We're blending both the imported, as you saw in our barrier sales, or on the previous page, we're at 486. And so our barrier recycled water sales were about 500. So we are still blending that water.
Okay, got it. And I guess that's probably more of a conversation for the E&O committee, but do we get some sort of an update on that at some point when the county is going to be letting us do near 100% again?
I see that Barkev is on the line. Perhaps maybe he could address that question for you right now at this time.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Director Houston. Yeah, it's a blend, as Marianne mentioned, and we are, of that 6 million gallons per day, we are producing about the last I checked was 4 million gallons per day. So 2/3 of that is recycled water. And the county, we are continuously checking in with the county to see when their improvements are, how their improvements are progressing. I'll be happy to check on that and see and answer your question, and perhaps we could send you an email notifications of what the update is on that.
Perfect. That's actually even better. So yeah, if you all, when you do get that information, we can just send that to the board so we know what the status is.
Will do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barkev.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Barkev.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I don't think we have any other questions on this section. Let's move on to the last part of it.
All right, so that is item 6FD, and this starts on page 94. This starts with the director's conference and travel expense. Again, these are expenses that reported through July. You'll see we've had expenditures of just under 6,300 compared to a budget of 75,000. And on the following page, on page 95, is the executive management and staff travel expense. We have about just under $1,000 spent for the first month as compared to the budget of 100,000.
Okay, any questions, board members? Okay, great. Let's see, I think we are wrapping up. So let's go on, item number 7. There is no closed session on this meeting.
That is correct.
Okay, and then director's comments or future agenda items. So I'll start with Director Williams, who's the member, and we'll go from there. So Director Williams.
No, thank you.
Okay, Director Deere or Director Gray, I know you're both on the line.
This is Don Deere. I want to compliment staff for the excellent work that they do in this area. Very impressive.
Okay, very good. Director Gray, if you're there, any comments?
Thank you. Just want to echo what Director Deere said. Staff is always very responsive and thorough. So thank you, and sorry wasn't on during the first part of the meeting. But thank you, Chair. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Excellent. No problem. And the only comment I have, well, I want to echo, of course, what's been said. Thank you, staff, for the very thorough reports. Actually, I was thinking about it too. Whoever is moving the presentation while you talk is doing a great job, because even I'm having to flip my pages physically here, but I don't think we give credit to that person. So thank you for that. And then actually we already talked about it, but the item I was going to ask was when we have those presentations to talk about the community banking program, but you've already told us you're looking at that in the next month or two. And I'm okay if it's in about 2 months. That's fine with me. Give yourself some time to get that accomplished. And maybe we can have a pretty robust discussion in October on that, okay?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm just sort of managing sort of items within the agenda as well, because I know, as Marianne mentioned to you, we have our annual presentation by Chandler on our investment portfolio. We also intend to bring back our annual presentation on our small and local business program. So we'll hear that update in September. And I know that you just heard on the teleworking, so I know that that's another significant item. So again, we can certainly bring it in September, but I think October will give us more time to address the items around that topic.
Yeah, I'm completely okay for an extra month there.
All right, we will plan for that then as well.
Okay. All right. I don't believe there's any other comments or business. So it says here our next scheduled meeting will be on September 21st, 2022. And I want to say thanks again to all of our staff and everybody who joined us. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.